The contract was already waiting for me when I arrived. Everyone in my husband's family was sitting around the dining table, watching me like they knew something I didn't. My father-in-law smiled as he pushed a thick folder across the table. Inside was a contract demanding $60,000 from me. According to him, I owed the Reed family money. The problem was simple. I had never signed anything. I had never agreed to anything. And the deeper I looked into his demand, the more I realized this wasn't about family at all. It was about secrets. Secrets hidden behind years of lies, debt, and manipulation. What started as a simple request for money eventually exposed a truth that destroyed my father-in-law's reputation, divided an entire family, and nearly ended my marriage. My name is Hannah Reed, and this is the story of how one fake contract revealed everything. My name is Hannah Reed. I was 34 years old when my father-in-law handed me a contract that claimed I owed his family $60,000. The strange part was that the money he wanted did not belong to him. It belonged to me. I still remember that afternoon, clearly. The entire Reed family was gathered at Arthur Reed's lake house outside Nashville. It was his 65th birthday, and everyone was there. My husband Ethan sat beside me. His younger brother Ryan was grilling outside. His wife Claire was setting drinks on the patio table. Arthur sat at the center of everything, like a king holding court. The Reed family loved appearances. Everything had to look perfect. Perfect lawn. Perfect family photos. Perfect stories. The truth never mattered as much as the image. I learned that during my first year of marriage, Arthur was a retired businessman who constantly reminded everyone how much he had sacrificed for the family. Every conversation somehow returned to him. Every achievement belonged to him. Every success was proof of his leadership. When Ethan and I got married, Arthur often introduced me to people by saying, "She's lucky to be part of the Reed family." He never asked about my accomplishments. He never cared that I owned my own consulting business. He never cared that I had purchased my first house at 29. In Arthur's mind, everything good in my life happened because I married his son. That afternoon, after lunch, Arthur stood and tapped a glass with a spoon. Everyone became quiet. "I have something important to discuss," he announced. Claire immediately smiled. Ryan nodded. Ethan looked uncomfortable. Arthur pulled a folder from his briefcase. Then he placed it directly in front of me. "Open it," he said. I looked at Ethan. He stared at the floor. So I opened the folder. Inside was a contract, several pages long, professionally printed. According to the document, I had agreed to contribute $60,000 to a family investment project managed by Arthur Reed. The signature section was blank, but everything else was complete. I read every page carefully. When I finished, I closed the folder. "What is this?" I asked. Arthur folded his arms. "A family obligation." I looked around the table. Nobody appeared surprised. Not even Ethan. Arthur continued speaking. "You've done very well for yourself. Hannah, the family believes it's time for you to contribute." I almost laughed. Instead, I asked a simple question. "Contribute to what?" Arthur smiled. "The family fund." I had never heard of a family fund. Not once, not during dating, not during our engagement, not during 3 years of marriage. Arthur leaned back in his chair. "Every successful member contributes. That's how families grow wealth." I looked at Ryan. "Did you contribute?" He looked away. Claire suddenly became interested in her drink. That was my answer. Arthur wanted my money. Only my money. The silence stretched. Finally, Ethan spoke. "Hannah, maybe we should consider it." I turned slowly toward him. "Consider giving your father $60,000? He swallowed hard. "It would help everyone." Everyone. That word irritated me. Whenever people said everyone, they usually meant themselves. I closed the folder. "No." Arthur's smile disappeared instantly. The entire atmosphere changed. For the first time, I saw anger in his eyes. "You owe this family." "No," I said calmly. "I don't." The rest of the afternoon was uncomfortable. Nobody argued openly. Nobody raised their voice. But the message was clear. I had disappointed them. On the drive home, Ethan barely spoke. When we finally reached our house, he parked in the driveway and stared through the windshield. "You embarrassed my father." I laughed. The sound surprised even me. Your father tried to take $60,000 from me. He wasn't taking it. What would you call it? Ethan had no answer. That night I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. Arthur wasn't the type of man who accepted rejection. He always had a plan, and for some reason I felt like I was missing part of the picture. The next morning I started looking. I worked as a financial consultant. Research was part of my job. Within a few hours I discovered something interesting. Arthur's business had been struggling for years. Public records showed multiple loans, several unpaid tax notices, 2 lawsuits from former partners. The image of success he presented to the family was mostly fiction. The deeper I looked, the worse it became. By the end of the week, I found evidence that Arthur had borrowed money from multiple relatives. He had convinced them to invest in projects that never produced returns. Most never asked questions. They trusted him. I didn't. One evening, I visited Ryan and Claire. I brought coffee and pretended I wanted advice. After 20 minutes of conversation, Ryan finally admitted something. He had given Arthur $40,000 3 years earlier. The money was gone. No investment, no returns, nothing. Claire had no idea. When Ryan realized what he had revealed, he immediately changed the subject. But it was enough. Now I understood. Arthur wasn't building a family fund. He was building a rescue fund. For himself. Over the next month, I gathered documents, records, bank filings, court filings, property records, everything. The story became clearer every day. Arthur was drowning in debt. The family just didn't know it. Then something happened that changed everything. Ethan found my research folder. I came home one evening and discovered him sitting at the kitchen table reading through the documents. His face looked pale. "You've been investigating my father?" I nodded. Someone had to. He turned several pages. The silence lasted nearly a minute. Then he whispered, "This can't be real." But it was real. Every document came from public records. Every number was verified. Every debt existed. For the first time since I had known him, Ethan looked genuinely shocked. He spent the next week checking everything himself. The results were the same. Arthur had lied to everyone. A month later, the family gathered again. This time at Arthur's house. Arthur expected another discussion about my contribution. Instead, I arrived carrying a binder. 300 pages. Evidence. Documents. Records. Facts. Arthur smiled when he saw me. That smile disappeared 10 minutes later. I placed the binder on the dining room table. Then I opened it. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. For nearly an hour, I explained everything. The debts, the loans, the lawsuits, the missing investments, the unpaid taxes, page after page, fact after fact. Arthur tried interrupting. The documents interrupted him back. By the end, Ryan looked sick. Claire was crying. Ethan sat silently beside me. Arthur's hands trembled. For years, he had controlled the family through confidence. But confidence is fragile when confronted by evidence. That night changed everything. The Reed family never looked at Arthur the same way again. Within 6 months, several relatives demanded repayment. More lawsuits followed. Properties were sold. Assets disappeared. The image Arthur spent 20 years creating collapsed completely. My marriage survived, barely. Ethan spent months rebuilding trust. But eventually, he admitted something important. "If you hadn't said no that day, I would have given him the money." I nodded, because I knew sometimes the most expensive word in the world is yes. And sometimes the most valuable word is no. Arthur wanted $60,000. Instead, his demand exposed every secret he had spent years hiding. And all because he assumed I wouldn't look at the numbers. The funny thing about that assumption is simple. Numbers always tell the truth. You just have to be willing to read them.